So here, Croke Park, 17 points to 14. Mayo finally get the job done against Dublin. I'm here with Edwin McGreal of the Mayo News. I mean, first off, just talk to me about the last few minutes and Mayo getting over the line. I mean, I'm a neutral. I mean, I have a bit of a foot in, like, sort of obviously playing for Cooler for the last 11 years. So to some degree, I'd be feeling, towards the likes of Conor O'Callaghan and Michael Symes, want them to do well. But Dublin are, just so dominant for so long. But how are you feeling as a Mayo man after all the torture you've been through?
Yeah, it was an emotional roller coaster, I think, that game. And you went from thinking at halftime, God, can we limit the damage in this game, to by the end of it, you're like, this is such a great. By the end of normal time, this is such a great opportunity. And then you're moving on to get to extra time, hoping there would have been an extra play after Robbie Henley points to 45. Because you thought Dublin would regroup and would regain their composure, but they didn't. And then in extra time, you're like, okay, Mayo have this if they want it. But then you're looking at Mayo trying to keep ball, and they're not as good as keeping ball as the Dubs are. And you're thinking, will you just attack and try and get scores? This doesn't suit you. You could concede a goal, but and they could have, but Dublin had hit the wall by that stage, so it didn't look like it was coming. But it was an incredible game from on so many levels, and just. I'd say anyone that was here will talk about this game for the rest of their lives. It was just an incredible game. It mightn't have been the highest standard of game at times. There might have been a lot of unforced errors, but in terms of just being a contest and a battle and just holding you, gripping you from, well, not maybe throughout, because the first half was one-sided, but from there on, it was a blockbuster.
There was a feeling of same old Dublin, like they're just going to strangle Mayo out of it. The All-Ireland final last year was, from a neutral point of view, it was pretty grim view in the last 15 minutes. I think it was only 5 points in it for a finish, but it felt like a 5-point hammering here. Did you feel like it was going the same way when it was 10-4 at half-time?
Oh, absolutely, and I thought that, Mayo were so tentative, and that's a word James Horan actually used afterwards. They were so tentative in that first half that when Dublin had the ball, Mayo were playing a sweeper, they were letting Dublin play the ball around, and you're like, gosh, you need to be pushing up, whatever about if you have a lead playing a sweeper in that scenario. And ironically, they didn't play a sweeper in extra time when they had a 3-point lead to defend, but Shinskei. But it just looked like Mayo were so flat. And I was minded to think of Malachy Clerkin's piece recently in the Irish Times, where he said Galway forgot that Mayo never don't turn up. And you're like, this could be the exception. And you're thinking in the second half, are Dublin now, will they try and, really drive on and, try and set Mayo back a while and apply the finishing touches? But Mayo found it within themselves, and I thought that's the biggest testimony you can pay to them, that as poor as they were and as poor individual performances they had and as flat as they were in the first half, it didn't affect them mentally. They still believed that there was a lot more in them. They weren't on the floor in that respect, and they just came out in the second half. In the first 5 minutes, a lot of big turnovers, couple of misses. They got one score, and you were just thinking, can they keep this up? And they did, and they were facilitated by a Dublin team who looked like they were stuck in gear, that they couldn't get out of it. But yeah, it was just such a contrast from the first half to the second half, and even still, Dublin, with 10 minutes to go, they looked comfortable. But Mayo just kept knocking, and they made a mistake here and there. But eventually they just got enough chances to get the game to extra time.
That moment when Diarmuid O'Connor kept in the 45 that was going wide, he just lunged. I'm sure everyone at home saw it. And get your comments and questions in here if you do want to. But he kept that in. Kevin McLaughlin knocks the ball over the bar, and there probably is no comeback only for that. And then forcing Davy Byrne to knock the ball out over the end line. There was that panic in Dublin that we just haven't seen before. They're so good at seeing games out and holding on to the ball for the last 10 minutes, driving teams nuts. But either have Mayo become better and braver going up to get the ball, or are Dublin just not the same outfit back there?
Yeah, it's interesting. The Diarmuid O'Connor one, it was just incredible. Not alone to stretch to reach it, but to actually be able to direct it to somewhere useful. Because it was, I think it was an awful long range free from nearly at the 65 from Robbie Henley. It was beyond his range really, and I don't know how he got his foot to it. But that, I think, cameo leading up to the last 45 that you described with Davy Byrne, Dublin were hand passing it inside their own small square under pressure. There could have been a goal there, and you were like, this is kind of, keeping possession to the wrong extreme, and they were just playing with fire. And I think Conor O'Shea, who came in and had a couple of poor turnovers, but he just put the pressure on Davy Byrne. It goes out for 45. And still more drama. 45 has to be retaken. Robbie Henley shanks the first one. I think it was brought back because of encroachment, but I'm not sure.
Kieran Kilkenny was definitely a little bit close, and the referee seemed to be gesturing towards him.
Yeah.
I don't know if he actually affected Henley, because it was an awful strike, wasn't it? And then to do it the next time, I couldn't believe that he knocked it over.
Oh yeah, and like he's from my own club, and like there's such, he's had some good days here, but he's had some dark days here. But today, to kick that. And like his kickouts, I think all through were really, really good. Like Mayo retained so much of their own kickout, and to nail that after missing the first one, it was just a phenomenal kick. And like he turned and he was gone back to the goal, before it had even went over the bar. Like he knew where it was gone, and it was like that was just an incredible subplot. And like in other games, like that would be the headline, like, but like it goes way down the plot lines with this one, because there was just so much drama. And like, sometimes we love to talk about games that are, of a very high standard and high scoring and so on and so forth. That wasn't one of these games, but it was a game that just gave us so much drama and intrigue and just kept you on the edge of your seat, and standing up maybe for so many stages, because it was just unbelievable.
And you mentioned Robbie Henley, and he's had a couple of difficult days here at Croke Park, and obviously that final against Dublin with the penalty and so on, the black card. But another brave man, Aidan O'Shea, didn't happen for him at all today. He's had, look, Dublin don't suit him, whatever it is, maybe his makeup or whatever it is, that like he's very, very good against certain teams, and in a lot of games he's been brilliant. But against Dublin, it just doesn't happen. And I think from early on, he had that first shot where he turned at the hill. Davy Byrne fell on the ground, knocked it wide. I don't think any of us could believe it. Then he gets the mark and then hits that wide from the 14. And you just, like, to be fair, like, Horan made the right decision taking him off. I don't think he had any doubt. Like, I brought him back on late on, which is probably a good boost. But like taking your captain off, that is a very brave move from James Horan. But at the same time, he had no choice, really.
Well, it was ballsy, like, and I wouldn't say necessarily that he had no choice. I think it was, on reflection, the right call. But you could have possibly looked to see, would you have him out the field? And definitely the dynamic of the full forward line changed there. There was a bit more pace to it, because they weren't necessarily looking in the second half to kick the ball in. So I think he was kind of wasted there. Certainly with the way he was playing. And like, I've said this many times before, like I know Aidan since he was in national school. He's not a prolific scorer. He's not, and when he's in at full forward, like people talk about, maybe not scoring in All-Ireland finals. He's not a scorer, and he was being playing in on full forward today, and like those misses, like they would haunt you, and it's just, you were thinking in that first half and getting to half time, God, it's a very lonely spot out there for him. I think his best position generally is as a defensive midfielder, but you could make an argument that against Dublin and the way Dublin play, and they're so good in possession, that they will just play around him. Whereas other teams, he might, have a better chance of creating the turnovers and the go forward ball in that scenario. And also on kickouts, like he might, be contesting long kickouts against other teams. Dublin will just, again, keep the ball away from him because they're so smart. So maybe that's what James Horan was thinking. If I bring him out, I've been playing into Dublin's hands. So he made the call, and, a decisive call. And it'll be interesting to see actually what the thinking is now for an All-Ireland final against whoever it may be. It looks like Kerry, but we'll see. Do you play him at full forward? Do you play him at midfield? You could make an argument he'd square off fairly well with David Moore, and that could be a good battle. But yeah, like I have to admit, I was surprised. But at the same time, you'd have to admire the willingness to make the call and to be decisive and, not die wondering. So, you have to give James Horan credit for that.
I think sometimes people are very willing or looking to dance on his head. If things don't go right for Aidan O'Shea, people like to dance on him, whatever it is. But like he's played, like his commitment to Mayo is obviously massive, and he's had some very, very good days. Just whatever it is about Dublin, it just doesn't work, as you've explained. Do you think there's any chance that he might not make the team for the final, that James might think, wow, it really works when we have a lot of pace and youth up there, and maybe I can use Aidan a different way off the bench? Or do you think you have to start your captain?
I don't think you have to start your captain. I think it's happened in the past in other counties where your captain hasn't necessarily started. I think it happened Mayo in 2004. Fergal Costello was the captain, didn't start the final. I don't think the status of captain necessarily matters, but it's a question of where do you want to play him. And I don't know in an All-Ireland final against Kerry if you want to be playing him in full forward. Perhaps, that'll be evaluated, and maybe they might feel that he might expose more chinks against Dublin or against Kerry than he did against Dublin. But he's not going to be a scorer in there for you, so you will need a lot of support around him. So do you look at playing him as a defensive midfielder? Do you look at him as an impact sub? It's very hard. It's very hard to know. But I do think, like, the 2017 All-Ireland final was probably his best day against Dublin. He was very, very good that day. But in general, he hasn't performed that well because he's a big, strong player, but he's not as mobile. He probably, 20 years ago, there would have been no discussion at all. But now the game is so mobile, and Mayo brought so much energy to that second half. So it's just a question of, what role do you find for him in that scenario? And again, I would always have said, as a defensive midfielder is where he can do a lot of good work. But again, you have to judge the opposition and see, can you find them with a role in that regard. And again, a lot of it will come down to who do Mayo have available for the All-Ireland? Is Oisin Mullen going to be back? Like, if he's back, like, it's a massive boost for Mayo. Is Owen McLaughlin going to be okay? Like, he took a big hit there.
That was a red card all day, wasn't it?
Yeah, I saw the replay. What really annoyed me at the time was I saw him hit the ground. I just missed the contact, but I saw him hit the ground, and I knew straight away he was in bother. And Conor Lane let play develop, and Dublin had a goal chance. And if that hit the net, it was game over. And I just thought, when you see a head injury like that, straight away you stop the game. And I could see Sean Moffat, the Mayo doctor, was absolutely livid that the play had been allowed to develop. And having seen it afterwards, like, I'm not sure how it was missed. Conor Lane had a good. He wasn't far away from it. It was so dangerous, and he's gone to hospital now. And
there could be a broken jaw. I mean, we've no idea really. Yeah. We're just speculating. But even same thing happened with Lee Keegan last year in the All-Ireland final, and it was let away. These things can turn a game, as you said. Ryan Pascal nearly knocked in the back of net, and that would have been game over.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose the thing with Mayo is you lose players, and the bench worked reasonably well today, but at the same time, Mayo are not in a position that they can be afford to losing players, big players, but yeah, I just felt it was a bad call by Conor Lane, and I don't think he had a great game overall. I think both teams would have been unhappy with a number of decisions, and I think again, on another day, that becomes the talking point, and perhaps it still is, but again, it has to take its place in a long queue.
Yeah, it does. I'm just looking at extra time here, and Dublin got the first point through Sean Bugler. And to be honest, maybe there was a goal on in that situation, taking the sensible option. It's often called. I detest fisted points, but anyway, that's another story. Mayo scored their first 4 attempts in a row, and at least three of them were from turnover situations. So Conroy got the first one and the second one, just his pace and his drive in extra time. Darren Cohen got an absolutely beautiful one, and then Ryan O'Donoghue, he got, I think, was his 5th point at that stage. But interestingly, that was the 77th minute and put Mayo 17-14 ahead. Mayo had one shot for the rest of the game, 13 minutes plus another couple of minutes of injury time. And that was a wide from Ryan O'Donoghue. I've never seen Mayo see a game out quite like that. Now, it's not like it was smooth sailing, but what a weird and strange and wonderful way to do it.
Yeah, I'm looking at my notes here now, and again, I could be completely. You'll correct me if I'm wrong here. I have no shots for Dublin in the second half.
In the second half of injury time or extra time?
Yes, yeah.
I have
there was balls inside, but
yeah, I have a wide because somebody knocked the ball out of Lee Keegan's hand, so he couldn't count that. Yes. Then a save, Cormac Costello. He had a save, and that was pretty much it. Yeah, you couldn't even get it in close.
It was a bit of a block, yeah.
Because Mayo owned the ball.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and probably tried to see the game out by keeping the ball. And again, no more than Dublin at the end of normal time. You're like, this is not what you're designed to do. It's not something they're very good at. And you saw a few times where a fellow would get the ball and there'd be 4 Dublin guys around him, and I don't know how they managed to get away a couple of times, but it was real tightrope walking. And you were just thinking, Dublin are tired. Drive it on, take them on, try and get the ball inside. If it doesn't stick, it doesn't stick. But look, at the end justifies the means. But I just felt Mayo would have been better off trying to create an insurance score, because you're always just thinking, and maybe it's the fatalism that comes with Mayo people, but you're always just thinking there would be a high ball into the square, someone gets a flick, it's a goal, and we're going to a penalty shootout. But again, I don't know would anyone been able for any more drama after that a penalty shootout would involve. But thankfully they didn't. They managed to keep the ball enough times and to see it out. But it was unusual to see Mayo doing that, and when you're used to Dublin doing that, and it's fair to say Dublin are still much better at it than Mayo, even though they mightn't have shown it at times here today. But like they are the masters of it. But Mayo improving a little bit in that regard. But I'd sooner, if they're in such a situation in All-Ireland final, I'd sooner they drive for home rather. And also, like, I don't think they played a sweeper late on. They put Aidan O'Shea in full back when Brian Fenton went in, but I don't think they played a sweeper, which was kind of beggar belief, when you were just like, so long as they didn't concede a goal, they had the game won. But anyway,
it couldn't have been more Mayo. Do you know, I have a couple of thoughts on Dublin. Obviously, they broke the COVID guidelines earlier on in the year, as a few other teams did, and then Dessie Farrell had to, the self-imposed exile for a while that Dublin County Board put on him. Maybe that affected their preparation to some degree, because like if you look at their performances, and I kind of mentioned this in the instant match report against Kerry in the second half of that league game. Kerry just completely took over after they dominated the first half. Meath dominated most of the second half in their Leinster semi-final. Kildare took a fair dent out of the scoreline in the second half before the late couple of scores from Dublin. And again here, 10-4 up at half-time, fell away for the rest of the second half. I don't know, is this something you've noticed? But Dublin were they looked like a team waiting to be knocked off. Now, I thought you were too far behind at this stage. But like, is it a case that when you look back at it now, in the cold light of day, you've had a bit of time to, to kind of let that sink in. Maybe this was just coming and Mayo were the right team at the right time to finish him off.
Well, maybe it was, we could say it was fitting after all the close games they've had, and Mayo were waiting since 2012 to beat them in any competition. But there's no doubt about it. If you think about the Mayo team that Dublin kept at arm's length in an All-Ireland final, they've lost David Clark, they've lost Chris Barrett, Oisin Mullen was out injured, Cillian O'Connor out injured, the two All-Stars out injured, and did 6 retirees. You would think, in order for Mayo against Dublin to go down to the wire, that Dublin were going to have to come back into the pack somewhat. And it's fair to say that some of the Mayo players have stepped it up since then, but not to the level that, Dublin were clearly not at the level they were at last year. And then the question, like Dessie Farrell spoke afterwards about, them being physically tired and they're on the go a long time. I don't know if they're physically tired. I think it's more a mental thing. Like, you're going for 7 in a row. And what more is there to prove? And another thing which I think has been understated is people talk about the impact that their bench has had on games. But what impact has the bench had on the levels that those guys that are starting on the team are getting to, because they're looking over their shoulder nervously? That isn't there anymore. Training matches. How many Dublin players are on the starting team are in a comfort zone? And that's not a criticism. That's what happens when your place is safe. So I think that was definitely a part of it. And like throughout the second half, you were like, Dublin are here for the taking. Can Mayo do it? And can they do it without Aidan O'Shea as well, without Cillian O'Connor, without Oisin Mullen? Had the wherewithal to do it, and they did. They got it extra time, and they pushed on from there. And but as good a win as this was for Mayo, and it was a phenomenal win and one of the best wins we've ever seen from Mayo in terms of drama and in terms of the enjoyment the Mayo fans clearly got from it. For it to happen, Dublin had to, and for Dublin to lose their All-Ireland, I think they had to fall back into the pack somewhat, and that's what has happened. And it'll be interesting to see now what kind of happens in the next 6 months. Is there going to be any more retirements? And I think, look, they have been absolutely phenomenal champions, and just so far above and beyond what we've seen. And they've brought Mayo to Dublin, have brought Mayo to the level Mayo have been at, because Mayo have been trying to hang on to them. They've been incredible champions. But I think 7 in a row, 8 in a row, 9 in a row, I don't think that's any good for the game, and that's not Dublin's fault, and we won't open that can of worms whatsoever. But I think just from a neutral perspective, people will enjoy the fact that there's going to be a new team winning an All-Ireland this year, whether it's Mayo, whether it's Kerry, whether it's Tyrone. I know who I want to win, obviously, but we'll there is going to be a change, because maybe it was because there was no crowd, but just the nature of last December's All-Ireland final, it was so pedestrian, and it was just, it was boring, and it wasn't enjoyable. And I think you need a competitive All-Ireland Championship, and we certainly have that now.
I won't keep you for too much longer, Edwin. You've been very good with your time. Just a couple of comments. One win was, will Killian O'Connor be ready for the final? He won't, according to James Horan. We were just down at the press conference. Watershed Moment says, the Shelminator for football. Dub's reign of basketball takes an ugly, vainglorious fall. Mayo a boo. Is there a curse on Mayo? Maybe not after this year. But you know what? I think there's plenty of Mayo fans out there who will enjoy the manner of this. And I'm not saying you will, but enjoy that there was like a couple of Dublin lads sent to the line late on, and that, you know, they obviously were a bit frustrated towards the end, and even, you know, they cheered Aidan O'Shea so loudly when he got substituted. I think there are Mayo fans out there who'll think, you know, it was nice to do it in that fashion and kind of sew it into it. Like, that's what the GA is about. It's about those rivalries. So I'm not saying you would, but there's definitely people who would enjoy that.
Oh no, look at that, and like Dublin fans enjoy beating Mayo, and Mayo fans are long overdue to return the favour, and there's no doubt about it. Like, you know, and there will be immense satisfaction in beating Dublin as the, you know, 6 in a row All-Ireland champions, that it was Mayo that took them down. And yeah, it's the nature of the rivalry. Like, it's a huge rivalry. It's the rivalry of the decade, like, you know. And you know, I don't think it's nasty. You'll always have a few idiots, like, you know. But I think I think it's just, you know, there'll be huge satisfaction in the same way, like Mayo fans took an awful lot from beating Galway in the Connacht final here in Croke Park as well, you know, because that's just an enduring legacy down through the generations, you know. So yeah, no, absolutely, there'll be a huge amount of satisfaction. And like, it's funny, like, you know, it's typical that Mayo would finally conquer Dublin, yet they're still only in an All-Ireland final. It's a semi-final that they've won. So I think Mayo fans will be enjoying tonight and the next couple of days, you know, but there's a big realization that Kerry will be looking at this game and licking their lips and thinking, right, Dublin are gone. They didn't look good at all today. Mayo squeezed over the line, you know, and that would have been a fear a few people would have had in Mayo, was that this was before the Oisín Mullin injury, that Mayo might go very close and might get over the line. But then what about Kerry in a final? And I think when the Oisín Mullin injury news came out, I think most people just said, right, okay, bonus territory. Can't see it happening today. It did happen, but you still have, you know, Kerry waiting in an All-Ireland final, and Mayo have plenty of history with Dublin in recent years. There's plenty of All-Ireland final history with Kerry, and none of it good. Like, so we'll see. That's assuming Tyrone don't field. Or
what do you make of that, by the way?
It's a very tricky one. It's a very tricky one. Like, I know Mayo had a COVID situation in the Leitrim game, and there was some of the Mayo players that were only back training on the Monday or Tuesday before the Connacht final, and some of them played, and it wasn't the same numbers as applied to Tyrone. I do think, like, you know, it's not as if there's, you know, 3 or 4 empty months. There's a club season. That's one of the factors at play here. So I'd like to know at what stage Tyrone are going to have players back training. You know, there's been a bit of clarity that it's half of their squad, but, you know, will some of them be back this week? Will some be back? You know, when are they back? And do the GA know that?
And who's close contact versus who?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think there needs to be more information available before that decision is taken. And if Tyrone are in a situation where, you know, someone is self-isolating until Friday, or 3 or 4 players are self-isolating or more until Friday, well, then that's a different scenario than a scenario where they're all available to train Tuesday night. So I just think that has to be factored into the decision, because, you know, we have to adapt to the reality of COVID and, you know, what it might do. And I know it's an All-Ireland semi-final, but there are, you know, there's a club championship in Mayo that's waiting, that will depend on what happens there. Same in Kerry and same in Tyrone. So it is a tricky one. But the GA are over barrel here now. Tyrone have put a gun to their head, and what way are the GA going to react? I think they have to probably allow a bit of leeway here. Ultimately,
it cost $1 million in ticket receipts.
Yeah, well,
they need money to up the championship.
Yeah, and that could be the most fundamental part of the decision-making process involved here. But I don't think anyone wants a scenario where you're not having an All-Ireland semi-final taking place. Like, Kerry get a bye to an All-Ireland final. But at the same time, I would hope to be a little bit more information, and and perhaps perhaps there has been behind the scenes, perhaps the GA are fully up to speed. But that would be that would be a decisive thing for me, is what is the exact time frame looking like for Tyrone from now until next Saturday, and that would be the decisive part, because obviously some of the players missed the Ulster final. Those players are back available as of from tomorrow at the latest. They might be back already. So therefore, did others contracted after the Ulster final? And what's the time frame looking like them? So it's not a simple one. But again, a bit more information. And yeah, I feel sorry for the GA here. I wouldn't feel sorry for them too often, but they're in a bind here now, and it's not necessarily their own making.
Okay, well, either way, Mayo are going to be there, and they'll have 2 games at Croke Park under the belts. So well done to Mayo, and enjoy the victory. Edwin McGreal of the Mayo News. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Shane.
Join the OurGame Supporters Club at Patreon for €5 per month to get audio podcasts of the Hurling and Football Show and much more exclusive material.